Why aren't there enough council homes? She says that growing up there was never a shortage, but now the waiting lists are long. Why can't we just build more? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, it's a big question, but according to Charity Shelter, council housing in England is at its lowest rate in decades, and that's since 1991. There's actually been an average annual net loss, about 24,000 social houses. So joining us now to discuss council homes in more detail is Councillor Richard Livingstone. He's a former Cabinet Member for Housing and current Chair of the Planning Committee at Southwark Council. Thank you very much for joining us, Richard. Why can't councils just build more council houses?
Well, some councils are. In London over the last decade, we've had about 6,000 council homes that have either been built or on the way to being built, 2,500 of those in Southwark. So Southwark is very much leading on doing this. But I mean, the big challenges are, I mean, you heard a little bit there about the impact of right to buy, but actually the biggest challenge, I think, for a borough like Southwark and many other London boroughs is the ability to get hold of the finance to be able to build. If you are a private house builder or if you're even a housing association, you can borrow money on the basis of what your return's likely to be in the future. If you're a council, you're told, no, this is your borrowing limit, you can't borrow above that. So I think we'd be great if government could have a look at this and say, well, actually, is there a way that we could allow councils to be able to borrow on the basis of what their future rent is? Because that would help kickstart the house build.
Wasn't Liz Truss talking about getting rid of all those quotas, because there's lots of quotas to build things and housing? Wasn't she talking about that?
Well, I think the problem with what's being talked about with the government's quotas is the quotas are there to drive up the numbers of homes being built. If you get rid of the quotas, the danger is that nobody builds. Everybody agrees there needs to be more housing. Lots of people don't like the new housing being built near them. And so the challenge is that might just lead to fewer houses being built. So I think we need to look at how we free up the system. How do we enable councils to build? House building in this country was at its highest levels when councils were building and private developers were building. We need to get back to that mixed economy rather than just relying on the private market to build homes.
And talk to us a bit about the replenishment of council housing stock when people buy their own council homes, because it has been the policy of the Conservative government really for 50 odd years, that they want people to be able to afford to buy their own council house and become home owners. But the problem has always been we then don't replace those homes that people buy. What is the current sort of replenishment rate for homes?
Well, I mean, the big challenge there is every time a council home is sold, if it's in London, it gets a discount, 116,000 on the price of it. It's actually valued often on the basis of what the home is worth if it had a sitting tenant, rather than being an open, empty home on the open market. So that takes more money off of it. So you're talking effectively of taking about £200,000 often off the price of a council home, and that means that the money the council has left at the end of that isn't enough to get enough homes built. And I don't have any problem with people exercising their right to buy, but I think it should be government that's replenishing that money. If it wants to give that discount, it ought to be giving that money back to the councils so that councils can build the housing stock to replace it.
Do you think that perhaps people shouldn't be allowed to buy their council houses?
Well, I think we need to look again at how the rules work, because the way it works at the moment just is, it's disastrous, as you've heard from the councillor in Ashfield, for how social housing works. I mean, you've got this big problem. I can go to council estates in Southwark and I'll find somebody paying a council rent of about £150 a week, and their next-door neighbour in the same block, same type of property, can be paying 3-4 times that amount because they are renting from the person who bought their home. And about half the council homes in Southwark that have been sold for the right to buy are now privately rented out. And so we've got a system which is, it doesn't work any longer.
Well, it's making a lot of millionaires as well. I mean, if you're lucky enough to buy your council house in the right area, then you go and sell it, then you can become a millionaire. That can't be right because the state is actually supporting you. Perhaps the rule should be that you can't actually buy.
There was a programme on a few years ago called the £1 Million Council House, which actually tracked somebody who had bought their council house and then for a low rate, obviously, at a discount, and then ended up selling it years later and effectively became a millionaire. So that kind of thing is very common. I know you're a Labour man, so I don't expect you to support the Conservatives' current sort of immigration policy. But we have had views in here talking about what the role of population growth is and whether successive government's inability to sort of get a hold on immigration numbers has led to problems like this. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I think we know that London's population has grown, and that's for a number of reasons. It's not just immigration, it's also people from across the country who decided to move into London. We've got a city which has now got 9 million people living in it, when 20 years ago it was 7 million. And so that has certainly created a big part of the pressure is on the housing market overall, and the pressure is for council housing. But that's certainly not just about immigration. That's lots of reasons that have brought people into the city.
And very, very briefly, a lot of people, sorry, perhaps I wouldn't do that. A lot of people talking about the fact that there is this mass migration and what plans that the government have to house a lot of these people, because ultimately a lot of them will end up staying in this country. Are there any other plans to kind of look after refugees and housing?
Well, I mean, this is slightly outside my area of expertise, I think. And I think that has to be something that's looked at a national level rather than something that a local council can deal with. I think what's important for us as a local council is we have got, even though we're building council homes, we have 16,000 people on the council housing waiting list in Southwark, most of those for a priority reason because they're homeless or overcrowded or got a medical need. So we need to find the solutions that can build those homes. And those are all people that are on the council waiting list that have been through the process which shows they have an absolute right to be here. This is not about people who've got any contested right to be in this country. These are people that live locally, that have an absolute need for a council home and need one. And if that's the problem in Southwark, you can multiply that across London. So we need to find solutions which are building those homes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and discussing that. It's obviously an issue lots of people care about, and especially with these leadership elections taking place, lots of people will be sort of looking at Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak to see what their policies are to solve problems like this.
That was Councillor Richard Livingstone. Thank you for joining us, Richard.